Oh, I'm back. Hi everybody, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. Now, first and foremost, I'd just like to apologise. During my sickness period, I have spoken very little indeed, and so my vocal cords are quite likely very tight. They are definitely not warmed up. I normally just talk all day every day, so they're always on the go. And so my voice might be a little bit weird until I get to a point, which is probably going to be, you know, a week or two from now, where I'm back up to vocal standards. We'll do a shrug right there. So apologies if there's lots of cut edits, because I need to go and gulp a bunch of this down. But I am definitely not back up to full fitness yet. I'm probably around about 70% there. However, I do believe that I'm well enough to sit in front of a camera now and talk about some stuff, talk about some things. And what I want to start off today talking about is patch 8.2 for the World of Warcraft, and the significance of patch 8.2, or as I'm going to discuss, to be quite honest with you, the lack of significance of patch 8.2. And I'll get to why throughout the course of the video. But a lot of people are looking at patch 8.2 as a turning point for the battle for Azeroth. Now, I don't think... Look, if we're just plain and simply honest, you know, you can defend World of Warcraft till you're blue in the face. But it's simple fact that Battle for Azeroth has done significant damage to the World of Warcraft. And it's done significant damage because we've had an expansion like Warlords of Draenor. You've also got to drag Warlords of Draenor into this argument, because if Warlords didn't exist, if you remove it from the equation and we have the other expansions, I think people would be a little bit more forgiving of this expansion. But because of the fact that we did have Warlords and people have been through this before, it's caused a lot of people to just go very quickly. Why? Because they know what to expect. Or they know what not to expect. And regardless of how you feel, I think Battle for Azeroth has done a huge amount of damage to the World of Warcraft. Not just in terms of subscriber numbers, but also in terms of how they adopt gameplay. And how the World of Warcraft, the development team, see fun. Because there's a lot of systems which are packed into Battle for Azeroth, which simply aren't designed to be fun. They're designed to be repetitive. They're designed to put you on the hamster wheel. But they're certainly not designed with fun in mind. They're only designed with retention in mind. And when we, of course, listen now to the quarterly earnings reports that we have, it's such a buzzword that they like to use. Retention, engagement, retention. Basically, it all just means trying to keep people on the product. The best way, I think, to keep people on the product is by having fun. But, you know, I'm an old-fashioned kind of a guy. So, 8.2 is on the PTR right now. And over the course of the next few days, weeks, and likely couple of months, we're going to start to see more content added to 8.2, announced content, and we're going to be able to test it and see whether or not this is a legitimate shift in terms of attitude by Blizzard Entertainment. Now, this aspect is actually very important indeed, because we need to see a legitimate shift by the development team into trying to create pieces of content which people do find enjoyable. I mean, Ian Hazacostas forever comes in front of the camera and says, we got a ton of great content, and he's lying. And he knows he's lying, because he understands that the current product at the moment is not good. He understands that the current product at the moment isn't designed to actually be fun. It's designed to just try and make people go around and around and around. And then it's working off the actual loyalty of World of Warcraft fans, and also fears of World of Warcraft fans. That's another thing that has to be stressed. People who have been on the product for so long, they're actually legitimately scared to move away to something else, because if they do, of course, then they could say to themselves, oh my god, I've just wasted X amount of years of my life on this product. So there is also a scare factor, a fear factor that is tied with leaving the World of Warcraft. So he's just trying to create stuff to try and get the hamster wheel going, and then hopefully the hardcore of hardcore World of Warcraft fans will stick around for the duration. But of course, this is non-sustainable because you're always going to erode the edges. The edges are always going to start eroding in. And when the edges start eroding in and in and in, your core player base gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so you've now got yourself with World of Warcraft into a situation where people are literally buying the new expansions to see if anything's changing, and then realizing that it's still the hamster wheel and leaving very quickly. And then, of course, because of this, Blizzard over the course of the last few years have tried to come up with excuses for the reason why they now have these drop-offs. I mean, for the first 4 or 5 years of the World of Warcraft, there were no excuses because there was no drop-off. But since drop-off started, and it's very easy to see why drop-off has started, then they have to come up with the excuses. And then the go-to excuse by the development team is people don't come back for patches. And this is a big problem now because they've ingrained this mentality into people. This is what they've done. And so now, whenever they release a patch, it's not got the significance that it should have, because they've been telling people for years and years and years now, patches don't bring people back. Only expansions do. And so you get a mentality with people where instead of saying, yeah, you know, I'm absolutely going to try out patch 8.1, patch 8.2, patch 8.3, whatever patch it may be, you now have a very skeptical audience that has been created by the World of Warcraft itself, where people are just like, I don't know, I'll give it to 9.0 now. I'll give it to the new expansion as opposed to the new patch. So when an expansion tries to course correct halfway through, you could actually end up with a situation where it doesn't work at all. That doesn't necessarily mean that the work that's gone into that patch is necessarily bad. It could actually be some really good stuff. But Blizzard themselves have created their own demon. They have created this mentality that people don't come back for patches. And so when Blizzard keep telling you that, people start listening. And so they're like, well, you know, Battle for Azeroth is now a wash for me. I might come back at 9.0 and see if they've significantly changed the product then. Then there's another major element. For all the good that different content can bring to a product, it's really going to mean naught if the gameplay isn't good. Now, if you look at some of the major MMOs out there, Elder Scrolls Online, Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, if you look at these MMORPGs and you look at how they have their own attitude towards gameplay, it's very interesting to see, because every single new expansion, Blizzard is forever messing with classes. Forever messing with classes. And it scares me to think about how much time, effort, resources, energy keep going into these constant class changes. It's as if the development team think that by tweaking the class, by changing the class up a bit, it's going to make the game feel different. Why? Because the content stays the same. Because the content is identical. So if they don't mess around with the classes and try and change the classes, then everything is going to feel the same. Because it's going to have the same beats, it's going to have the same rhythm all the way through. And that's just going to be boring for everybody. Whereas you look at a game like Final Fantasy XIV or the Elder Scrolls, for instance, and they very rarely mess around with the classes. Very rarely mess around with the classes indeed. And their focus seems to be on content production. That's where their main focus is. Very little tweaks and changes to the classes. Working off a system of it ain't broke, don't fix it. Whereas the World of Warcraft seems to be working off the system of it's constantly broke, and therefore we're constantly trying to fix it. Because you're never ever going to appease everybody. And when classes are in a really good position, like, for all the faults that Mists had at being very boring for the vast majority of it, and it's all well and good looking back on the majority of it rose-tinted specs, but it was so patchy, that expansion. But the classes played brilliantly in Mist. That's one thing that you could say. The classes played really well indeed. And I'm not complimenting WoD by any stretch of the imagination, but for how bad everything was in WoD, classes still played well. And so your class never felt boring. And yet with BFA, they've got themselves into a position where suddenly, when they released the alpha and they put all these changes and tweaks to the classes, some of them were really good fun. Warlocks were really good fun to play in the alpha. And then they just took away this and they tweaked that and they changed that and they tweaked it. And then by the time it got to BFA release, Warlocks were horrible to play. They were so boring. It's just god-awful. And this seemed to be a popular complaint amongst a lot of people, because they were just constantly faffing around with the class changes. And it was even like a month, 2 months before the release of BFA, it was announced that's it for content. What's on the beta now, that's it. And it just baffles me, absolutely baffles me, that you can say that about your product and then just continue to mess around with classes and tweak classes when there's a lot of feedback that was going back for things like Warfronts, etc. That these things aren't good, they're boring. Azerite armor, no. What did they do? Nothing. Fanning around with classes, class changes, class tweaks, class changes, class tweaks. So even if 8.2 brings a lot of really good content to the game, if people are still fighting their classes, if they still feel as if they're not having fun playing their own classes, it will only hold them for a very short period of time. And you might see the one cycle, the one subscription cycle of a month, and that is it. And then you get the little peak because of people coming out to test it, and then going straight back down again. Well, I think Blizzard and World of Warcraft have got to stop messing around constantly with classes, particularly when you get a lot of a certain class saying, yeah, we really like the position of this class right now. Blizzard should be therefore trying to lock that down and say, right, okay, which classes therefore aren't people having fun with? Can we tweak it based off that to try and bring it to a position where it is fun without breaking the game? And there is so much emphasis on trying to get everything so nuancedly balanced that you're forever going to be changing. There's always going to be a rise, there's always going to be a dip, everything's going to be everywhere, and everyone's always going to be complaining. So you might as well get your classes into a position where people are actually just enjoying playing the damn things. If people are enjoying playing the classes and then people enjoying playing the content, you've got a winner there. You've got a winner there. And if it's not going to be so balanced, so be it. And this is why, games like Final Fantasy XIV come into play, because classes have different specializations. Some classes are very good at single target damage. However, they lack AoE. And then you've got other classes that are pretty weak at single target, but they do great AoE. And they're not, and that's why they don't have things like penis meters and stuff like that, because they're more interested in people just enjoying how a class plays more than doing nuance of damage. But Blizzard's got another problem, of course, because it's trying to change everything into a bloody esport. Fucking dungeons are in esport. Raiding's got to be an esport. PvP's got to be an esport. And if it's going to be an esport, everything's got to be balanced so. And so they're juggling again. All the classes are getting juggled. And the 99.9% of the game, the people who just want to enjoy the freaking product, are getting constantly dicked on. Which brings me on to my next fundamental problem with the World of Warcraft. And that is, it offers zero challenge whatsoever. Outside of Mythic Plus X and Raiding, the game itself is absolutely easy mode. It doesn't offer any difficulty whatsoever. So it doesn't matter if you put new content into the game. If you're just cutting through it like a hot knife through butter, what's the point? If you have a quest chain to do and all you're doing is switching off because everything's just so easy to go bang, 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 dead, bang, bang. All you're doing is just trying to get to the edge of that quest. That is it. You're not engaging in the quest. You're not thinking. You're not worried that you might die. You're not worried that you might fail. There is nothing at stake. There are no stakes whatsoever. Final Fantasy XIV have an event going on in the game at the moment. It's a little crossover with Final Fantasy XV. Noctis has found himself in Eorzea for whatever reason. And the Regalia car has broken down. You help the Regalia car get fixed. And you also help Noctis get back to his own world, where he comes across some tests and trials. And it ends up in a fight with one of the early primals from the game, which has been slightly tweaked. And they also slightly tweak as well how the gameplay mechanics work, because they add an extra special button in which allows you to warp like Noctis does in Final Fantasy XV. And if you manage to time your warps with Noctis, then you can create the link attacks that you get in Final Fantasy XV, which does a lot more damage. And you need to get these linked attacks done, otherwise you could fail. And it actually took me 3 attempts to do that boss before I was successful. And because the fight itself did involve me having to think tactically about how to do it, it had to make me think about how to chain together my warp attacks as well as my own attacks, which I have to build up and damage, when to pull out of the fight to avoid taking certain big hits, etc., etc. I was engaged in the fight, and there was a chance of failure for me. And I did. I failed twice, and I did it on the 3rd attempt. And so when I managed to defeat the boss on the 3rd attempt, it felt really satisfying. It felt really satisfying indeed, and I was very happy that I managed to do it. I hadn't played Final Fantasy XIV for a little while. I dusted off my cobwebs, and it felt very good indeed. I got some very nice rewards, Noctis's outfit, and I went to the Golden Saucer, which is the casino. While the World of Warcraft doesn't have a casino, I'll never know. And it went to the casino, and I could also purchase the Regalia car with some MGP, which I had, 200,000 MGP. So I now have this mount where I can have 3 more people in the car apart from myself. So the 4 of us can get into this mount. We can all get into the Regalia mount, chill out, drive around the place. Very satisfying indeed. But I felt as if I earned the ability to purchase that Regalia because of how I had to concentrate on the fight, because the fight actually had a level of difficulty and challenge attached to it. So if World of Warcraft doesn't decide to actually take a risk and up the difficulty level, then it doesn't matter what new content you put into the game. If people are just cutting through it, they will get bored very quickly. Very, very quickly indeed. And that is a huge fundamental problem of World of Warcraft, which needs to be addressed for the future going forward, because the game just doesn't offer any outside world challenge at all. So let's just wrap things up now. For all the good that a directional change in content can do for a game, and believe me when I say that BFA needs a serious shift in terms of how it creates content for itself, it will ultimately mean nothing unless there are fundamental changes to the product. And in the case of the World of Warcraft, the fundamental changes are, number 1, class. If your class is not fun to play, people aren't going to stick around. It's as simple as that. There's no evidence to support that they'll jump onto an alt character and do the content through that. You'll see a little spike as people will be curious to see what 8.2 brings to the game. But if they're not having fun playing their classes, it could be as simple as a 1-month subscription change and then out the door they go. And within a couple of months' time, you can have everything back to the way it was before 8.2. Also, if there is no challenge to be had with the new content, what is the point? What is the point? When there are no stakes to be had, what is the point? People will get bored very quickly because once again, they will feel as if they are forced to go into raiding or Mythic X dungeoneering in an effort to get some sort of challenge out the game. And if they're bored of that element, if they're bored of just repeating dungeons over and over again, if they're not wanting to get into the raid cycle, and it's very easy to see why people wouldn't when you have LFR, normal, heroic, mythic, you got so many levels of just doing the same old thing. Again, why bother? Why stick around? If Blizzard are truly wanting to make a difference with 8.2, then they've got to take some risks. And those risks are, yeah, they've got to clean up some of this class mess which is going on right now. And they also have to add some challenge to the game. They have to give people the opportunity to fail. Because if you fail, when you succeed, it feels 10 times more satisfying. But if you're just going to bukake stuff at them, as you have been doing, it's just going to feel like the same old, same old. So, regardless of what 8.2 brings to the table, I feel as if the World of Warcraft has other challenges that it needs to overcome at the same time for it to be ultimately successful. It might grab people's attention for a month or two, but unless these fundamental changes are brought into the product, I don't see it being sustained whatsoever. And what is coming after 8.2? Nobody knows. But if 8.2 is going to be such a big content drop and it's not successful, then I'll tell you right now, 8.3 won't be either. So I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do get a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media and Twitch for live streaming. Links are in the description box down below. And I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care. Bye for now.